All right, good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Kuf Gimel in Masechah Shabbos. Hold on, I didn't turn my light. 1 second. There's a little better. Sorry about that. Today is Daf Kuf Gimel, Masechah Eruvin, winding down. So we got to the bottom of the Mishnah, the bottom of Kuf Beis and Beis. Once again, if anybody has to leave early, we're only going to get to the Mishnah on Kuf Gimel and Beis, and then we'll leave us with a little less than like a blot and a half or so on Sunday, Mirza Hashem. So Mishnah says, Kaishin Nima B'Mikdash Avalei B'Medina. So now still with continuing with certain differences between the Mikdash and the Medina. So one is allowed to go ahead and tie, right, the string in the Mikdash, but not for the Medina. So we're talking about for one of the musical instruments in the Beis Hamikdash that used to accompany with the Levim, so when they would do the shiros, there was instruments, and if one of the strings broke, they're allowed to go ahead and tie it. But you can do the Mikdash, that was permitted. Is shvus, right? It was permitted, it's not derais, and therefore not Medina. However, if you're going to tie it in the first place, right? In other words, you're tying for the first place, you're going to make the instrument, then that you can't do on Shabbos, only to fix it on Shabbos if it broke, because if you're fixing it, that means it broke just then, and therefore you couldn't have prepared that before Shabbos because it wasn't broken yet. So therefore, that which we allow you to go ahead and do or kaishin and to tie it, it's only because it happened on Shabbos. But if you're going to tie it in the first place, that could have been done before Shabbos, and therefore there is no head to the Mikdash. And in addition to being Asur in the Medina, it's also Asur in the Mikdash. Fine, so let's see the Gemara. Zak the Gemara, I v'ramin u'asir kasha. It says nemas kina shenifseka lo ha'kaisha ela einva. If a string broke of the kinor, right, of the harp, then you can't go ahead and tie it. Rather, you have to go ahead and make a bow. So our Mishnah says kaishra, and over here specifically says eina loya kaishra ela einva. You can only tie it in a bow. So like kasha, so we're going to give several terutzim. So like kasha, ha rabbanim ha Rabbi Eliezer. So one is opinion of the Rabbanan, and the other one is opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Right, and which the Eliezer Damar Machshir Mitzvah Deichas Shabbos Kaisha. According to Rabbi Eliezer, so Machshir Mitzvah that prayers Deichas Shabbos, and therefore Kaisha. Therefore, you can go ahead and tie it. And Rabbanan Dami Ein Deich, and how the Rabbanan would say the Machshir, the preparations for a mitzvah, in other words, just fixing the harp, which is considered to be a Machshir Mitzvah. And according to them, since you can't go ahead and tie it, therefore you can't perform this deraisa. Therefore, you can only go ahead and do a drabanan. So therefore, in other words, the difference is whether one is allowed to do machshir mitzvahs deichas Shabbos or not. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it is right, and according to Rabbanan, machshir mitzvah are not ein deichas Shabbos. So Rabbi Eliezer, I feel like so according to Rabbi Eliezer, if it's a machshir mitzvah, it's deichas Shabbos. Why can't you? Why do we say it's only you can only tie it? But in betchila it's usher, right? If it's machshir mitzvahs deichas Shabbos, you should be allowed to go ahead and tie it in the first place. So Eloi kasha ha the Rabbi Yehuda ha the Rabbanan. No, it must be a difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. In other words, the machlokes as to the difference between to tie it and to make a bow, right? According to the Rabbanan, right? According to Rabbi Yehuda, right, they're both the same. So therefore, since they're both the same, you can't go ahead and make then there's no difference. But according to Rabbanan, since you can make a bow, right, and bow is not a deraisa and not a knot, therefore they say make a bow and not a and therefore they said make a bow and not a knot because they hold there's a difference. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, holds the same thing. I'll leave it to man. I understand. So according to the back up a second. Let's go back to the argument of machshir and mitzvah, right? So turn the page. If it's according to Rabbi Eliezer who says machshir mitzvah, so if there's no difference between a bow and a knot, you should be able to do it lechatchila. So ela leikasha ha Rabbi Shimon ha Rabbanan. Rather, we'll say no. The difference is Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Tanya is learning a brisa. Ben Levi shenifsika loynema bekinor. Right? If you have a Ben Levi who had a his harp, right? The string broke. Kaishra, he can go ahead and tie it. Right? That was the first opinion, right? That was the Rabbanan there. And Rabbi Shimon Aimer, go ahead and make a bow. So you see, one holds you go ahead and you can tie it. The other one says no, only make a bow. And Rabbi Shimon Elazar Aimer, Afiyena Mashmis is a kol. Ella says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says technical difficulty. He says no. If you go ahead and you make a bow, you're not going to have good sound from this harp. So Ella Mishalshim Lamata v'Karcham Melamala Mishalshel Lamala v'Karcham Mata. You have to go ahead and I guess wrap the string around, either from top to bottom or bottom to top, in order to go ahead and produce the sound. So therefore, you see. Nevertheless, according to this brisa, so one says you can go ahead and tie it, right? And the other one says, right, and the other one said, right, because we saw before, that was the brisa, and the other one says you can't go ahead and tie it, but rather only make a bow. That would be opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Viboy Sema, Hava Rabbanan, or you can say that it's both the opinion of the Rabbanan who hold that really can tie it. Like Kashi can't be answered coming outside. If over here is when it broke in the middle, so therefore you have to go ahead and tie it because you can't make a bow in the middle because then it won't be you won't have a good sound. But if it's on the side or it's not there, then you can go ahead and make a bow. Then that's the difference. So now the difference between the two is it depends where the break happens. The break happens in the middle, then you have to go ahead and tie it. You have no other choice. But if it broke on the side, then you can go ahead and make a bow. Even if it's in the middle, right? And nevertheless, you can go ahead and tie it. Now the Marsav Gazrinan. Umar Savar Loigas. And one says, no, there's a Gzeir, because if we allow it to go ahead and do the Emsa, then you might go ahead and do a Minatzad, and therefore you should still go ahead and do a bow. And the other one says, no, there is no Gzeira. You can go ahead and even make a regular knot, even if it's in the end, in the middle. Fine. Mishnah. So now Mishnah says, Chayzchin Yabelas b'Mikdash aval b'Medina. One is working in the Mikdash, and there's a yabelas. Yabelas is like a wart, right? There's a wart on the animal. It's a mum, right? And so one is allowed to go ahead and remove it, right? In the Mikdash, aval loy b'Medina. All right, you can remove it in the Mikdash. You can do it for the purpose of the karbanos, but you can't do it outside the base of Mikdash. Vim bekli kan v'kan aser. So, but however, if you use a kli, then it's aser. So that which you said in the beginning, right? What do we see from here? That which you said in the beginning, that's mutter to use. It's mutter to do it biyad, with your hand, right? With your hand, you're not the chayra, right? You're not violating a doraisa. It's only derabanan to remove the wart with your hand from the animal. But if you use a kli, then not only is it aser in the Medina, that's even aser in the Mikdash. So you can't use a kli at all, and if you use your hand, you can do it in the Mikdash, but not in the Medina. So now, V'raminu, once again, we'll ask the kasha for Mishnah. So it says the Mishnah over there, Mishnah and Psachim, which were basically, this is going to be the discussion of today's daf, between the difference between this Mishnah, our Mishnah, and this Mishnah in Psachim. One is allowed to go ahead and kivu, right? Kivu is basically he's riding it. In other words, he's bringing an animal he's basically carrying in Rosh Hashanah, right? His carbon pesach. So kivu, or right, he's bringing it from outside the tchum. And cutting off the wart, right? Which our Mishnah says, ein doichen, right? It is not doichen, right? So you see over here, to cut it off, is not doichen. Rabbi Eliezer, I mean doichen. Rabbi Eliezer over there says doichen. Now, according to the Tanakama over here, which we just read, right? Forget Rabbi Eliezer right now. Right? According to the Tanakama, you see you're not allowed to go ahead and remove a wart, right? The mikdash, right? So why does our Mishnah say chaytchin yavelis? And over here it says you can't go ahead and do it for the Karban Pesach. So we're going to give several tirusim. So Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina. So both Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina, each of them gave teres. We don't know who said what. Right? One says both these are talking about basically an active, right, a wet wart, basically one that's current. And very simple. Our Mishnah, which says you're allowed to go ahead and do it, is using biyad, and that Mishnah over there in Pesachim, which says you're not allowed to go ahead and remove the wart for the Karban Pesach, right? Is Shabbos, right? Is talking about a kli. So it's talking about a kli, and therefore you can't use a kli to remove it. That would violate it. And the other one said between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosef Bechanina, both of them are talking about he's not using kli at all. He's using biyad. One's talking about when it's wet. Where it's wet, it's an active. It's basically active, or you wouldn't be able to move it. And the other one says no, where it's dry. since you're just basically scraping off like dead skin, therefore that would be mutter even with your hand. And that was the case of our Mishnah. Fine. Now we have to see why they didn't say like one another. So the one who said the machlokes is because our Mishnah is talking about biyad, the Mishnah of the Pesach is talking about bekli. Why didn't you give the answer of our Mishnah was talking about dry, and over there was talking about wet? Right, my time, because according to this opinion, if it was dry, even with a kli, it's mutter. Why? Because you're scraping it off. It basically disintegrates. It just falls off. It crumbles off. So therefore, since it's crumbling off, it's not even derais. It's not a removing of a wart, right? That's not taking off something which would be a malacha. So therefore, it would be okay, right? It would be a problem. By the way, I didn't mention, right, that the problem is to take off, right, is, right, if you remove it, perhaps it's a talada of giza, right, of shearing, right, shearing an animal, right, therefore there'll be a talada of that, and therefore, but if it's dry, it's nothing, it's garnished. But according to the opinion who holds, okay, the difference between the two Mishnayos is our Mishnah is talking about a dry one, therefore it's mutter, and the Mishnah of the Pesach was talking about a wet one, and therefore a wet one that's a malacha, and that's a deraisa, even biyad, and therefore you can't do it. It's my time. Why do you differentiate between biyad and bekli? So bekli hatanani bekli kamakan aser. Right, because there's no need to say that you can't use a kli, right? Because you want to say that Mishnah there was teaching a halacha that you can't use a kli to remove a wart on Shabbos, right? Our Mishnah says it. Our Mishnah says beferish, right? V'im bekli kan v'kan aser, no chiddush there. So therefore, we didn't need another Mishnah to talk about a kli. Our Mishnah in Eruvin already discussed it, right? So therefore, that Mishnah there must be talking about. We're talking both cases talking about biyad. Okay, so what would the other one say? So why did we repeat a case of a kli? So maybe over there it says no. Even in the case of kli, there's a machlokes because even as we mentioned, right, there's two opinions in that Mishnah, right? There's the Tanakama, right, which is the Rabbanan, and then there's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says it is even with a kli, it's deicha. You're allowed to go ahead and use a kli to remove the wart, according to Rabbi Eliezer. So it is a kiddush there. So he says no. It says you can't say over there that Rabbi Eliezer is teaching you that we're using a kli and it's deraisa. Why? Because look at the other cases talking about. It's talking about, right, chutz tchum, right? It's talking about a case of when he's carrying it, right? And one who carries an animal, right? Let's say chai noiseas asmo, right? An animal, if one carries a living thing, so the living thing also helps supports itself, and therefore it's only derabanan if you carry a living thing. Additionally, right, coming from outside the tchum is also derabanan, right? That's only derabanan if you come from outside 2,000 amos. So you bring that in, so you only violate derabanan. So if the first two cases are derabanan, the third case also is talking about a derabanan. So therefore, you can't say it's a deraisa, right, of removing the wart. It must be only a derabanan, and that what you say, even derabanan is not deicha. V'idach, and what would the opinion say? Says it must be that no, really they are deraisas, and we're talking about removing with the kli. Right near kiva. You're gonna say, but the other is why is that deraisa? No, two cases of rabbanan. So it must be your kiva delikrab nasan demachai. So therefore, it must be this Tana must hold like that, who holds that if you carry an animal, you actually violated deraisa, which is not like Rab Nosson, because Rab Nosson was the one who's had the sfar of chai noisias asmo, that if you carry a living thing, you're not chai chatus because it's not a deraisa, because they help support themselves, and it's also therefore that case is a derabanan when you carry the animal, it's just a rabbim, and also. Also, right? So, therefore, since you carry the animal, that's your violated deraisa, and also it must be that the case of chutz tchum is also like Rabbi Akiva, who holds that tchumen is deraisa. So, therefore, according to the other opinion, actually, this case, all three must be referring to deraisas. Carrying is a deraisa, even if you carry an animal, which is not like Rav Nosson, right? Coming from outside the tchum, according to Rabbi Kiva, is a deraisa, and then therefore also the third case, removing the wart, must be referring to using a kli, and that's also a deraisa. Fine. All right. So that was that. Mason Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef has a kasha. Omar Rabbi Eliezer kal v'chaymer. So you're going to say over there, right? So we just gave a teres. So over there is talking about deraisas, right? Deraisas, and the deraisa case was the machlokes over there, right? So The case of Psachim was, right, you brought it, you carried it, or you brought for the Chutz Tchum, or you cut off the Abelas. It's not Deichas Shabbos, he's Deraisas, and Rabbi Eliezer says Deichen. Rabbi Eliezer says Deichen. So Machlokes as to whether that case is referring to Deraisas or Dirabbanans. That depended on whether, you said that the difference between our Mishnah and that Mishnah Psachim was talking about the Kli, or whether the difference was talking about whether it was dry and wet. Now, so Mesa Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Eliezer over there says in responding to the Rabbanan, right? Rabbi Eliezer says, remember, it's mutter, these are Deichas HaShabbos. So it says, Ukavachemer, Umashchita shehi mishum melacha Deichas HaShabbos, Ela mishum shemishum Shabbos, Ena den sheyichas HaShabbos. So in the argument over there, Rabbi Eliezer responds to the Chachamim, says if Shchita, which is the Raisa, is Deichas HaShabbos, so these, which are only the Rabbanan, right, certainly should be Deichas Shabbos. So what do you see over there? You see that these three cases are referring to Derabanans, not Deraisas. Okay, it says Derabanans, right? You can't be referring to as talking about with a Kli. It must be Habaha. It must be referring to using Biyad, and therefore the only question is, right? Was it wet or was it dry? So it's a proof that way. So Elam Rav Yosef, Habaha Biyad. Really, you're right. It is Biyad, and therefore it's not Deraisas. Ushvus Mikdash b'Mikdash hitiru, Ushvus demikdash b'Medina lo hitiru. Now is a difference, right? There's a shvus in the mikdash, right? Basically, a shvus which had to be done for the purpose of for doing a korban. Shows me this. So only in the mikdash was that permitted. So therefore, in our Mishnah, when we're talking about biyad, we're talking about the animal. Let's say the korban tamid. The korban tamid has to be brought, so therefore you can go ahead and remove the wart because that's the mikdash. However, Shavuos Mikdash in Medina, but when it comes to the Korban Pesach actually was not checked in the Mikdash, it was actually checked at home, right? You check it at home, and then you go ahead and bring it. So if that's the case, right, you go ahead and check it at home. So that's a Shavuos de Mikdash. It is for the purpose of Mikdash, but that is done in the Medina. Lo hitir, that was not permitted. So therefore, only a Shavuos de Mikdash b'Mikdash, right, is permitted, but not Shavuos de Mikdash de Medina is not permitted. So the Gemara says, is that true? So Yosef Abai v'kamela shmaitza. So says Abai says over this. Eser Rav Savla Abai. So Abai taught this distinction between a shvus mikdash b'mikdash versus a shvus mikdash b'medina. So it says, so Abai taught over to Rav Yosef, and Eser Rav Savla Abai. So Rav Safra asked a kasha. So Hayek Rav Yisrael Skufa v'niskal hasefer miyado go leslo. So we learned earlier, one is going ahead and reading by a stoop. And it falls out of his hand. He's allowed to go ahead and basically bring it back to him, right? So now the bringing it back to him, right, of this sefer, right, is sort of the havmin is equivalent, right, to basically a shvus de mikdash, because this is needed for a mitzvah, right? You can't go ahead and leave the scroll, leave the sefer, right? In the Shus Rabbim, you're allowed to go ahead. If one end is there, you're allowed to go ahead and bring it back. But this over here is the case of Shvus de Mikdash, which is in the Medina, right? We're talking about it's on the skufa, which is not in the base of Mikdash, right? It's some other, stoop or ledge, or not ledge, but like curb area on the side. V'loi gezrina, right? And there is no gezerah there. So what do you see over there? A shvus de mikdash in Medina is mutter. So why don't we say the shvus de mikdash in the case earlier of using yad, right, of using your hand to remove the wart, shouldn't that also be permitted, right? The Gemara says, who says that's a similar case? Are we not talking about, maybe we established earlier that the Yiskuba was not a Rosh Hashanah, rather it was a Carmelist. And therefore, it was a karmas with the Shus Rabbim, and the came of the Gida B'Yad. Even if it completely came out of his hands, it wouldn't even be deraisa. So therefore, there was no reason for the Gezer in that case. Don't ask the kasha in that case, because that case wasn't a possible deraisa, and therefore we never said in that case you can go ahead. There was no, we weren't worried for a deraisa, but in our case, right, if you go ahead and remove it with a kli, it would be a violation of a deraisa. So Esvei. That's another question. So So over here we're talking about if it's a case of where Friday night Leil Pesach is Shabbos, right? Now you can't go ahead and cook on Shabbos. So what do you do with the Korban Pesach? You're supposed to roast it, right? You roast it on the first night of Pesach, but the first night of Pesach is Shabbos. You can't roast on Shabbos. So what do? You basically put it in the tanur, right? You put it in the oven, right, prior to, as it's getting dark, prior to Shabbos. Right? Over here, it's a Shvus Mikdash, right? It's something which is needed for the mitzvah, right? You need to go ahead and roast your Korban Pesach, and it's in the Medina, right? It's in your homes. It's not occurring in the base of Mikdash. And over there, right, we're not worried you're going to go ahead and stoke your coals, right? So there is no gzeir in that case. So we see that a Shvus Mikdash Medina, we allow it. So Ishtik, good catch, he was quiet. However, Kiyos the coming to Rav Yosef, when he came for Rav Yosef, this is the reason why that case was different. Why you're allowed to go ahead and roast it, and there is no gzeira, right? You can't go, right? So my time lo tishan alei b'nei chabura is reasoning. So he said, why don't you give the teretz that, right? The people of a chabura, right, are his reason. Since he's not alone, he's with a bunch of others, right? So therefore, they would stop him if he was going to go ahead and stoke the coals. So therefore, that's the reason why there's no gzeira in that case, and that's why it's mutter. But other cases where we don't have that, maybe it would be usher. So why did he give that there? So Abaye, Kohanim is reason hein amrinan, Bnei Chabura is reason hein lo amrinan. Right? We only say when people are zrizin, it only comes to Kohanim, right? When the Kohanim, right, they study all the halachas when it comes to karbanos, when they do it, right? They're not there all the time, so therefore when they are there during their times of the year, a couple times a year, therefore they are zaris, they are careful. However, Bnei Chabura, there is no sort to say Bnei Chabura is zrizin, and therefore that's the reason why he didn't give a teretz, and he was quiet because l'chara there should be a gzeir in that case of shem yechata, but there was not. And Rav Omar, Rav says, going back to what we said earlier between the two teretz, right? Right, when Rav says, when he said hava hava yad, right? In other words, both our Mishnah, which says that you can go ahead and remove the wart. Versus the Mishnah in Psachim, which says that ein daichen, you have also ein daichen, right? So it must be, maybe you can say Rebbe Eliezer, right? The Omar machshir mitzvah daiches Shabbos. Our Mishnah, which says chayschen yavels b'mikdash, is talking about machshir mitzvah. We touched on this before. Machshir mitzvah. We had this from the case of the harp, right, with the string that broke. So machshir mitzvah, right? Machshir mitzvah are not part of the actual mitzvah, but to go ahead and prepare for the mitzvah. So if you need to go ahead and do it according to Rebbe Eliezer, doichenes Shabbos, machshir mitzvah are doichenes Shabbos, and therefore you can go ahead and remove the wart for the mitzvah. It's machshir mitzvah to go ahead and bring the tamid. Umode Rebbe Eliezer the kamadef shalishnuim mashnia, and Rebbe Eliezer does agree that so as for a person, as much as you can change, So therefore, do it with your hand, biyad, but don't do it with a kli. All right, and that's the difference in our Mishnah. So our Mishnah goes according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. And my, right, turn the page, so mahi. So where do you see it? It's a tiny blue and a kohen also lo yavelas, chavero chaytra lo b'shinov, right? So interesting case, right? A person gets let's say a kohen, right? He has some sort of wart on his hand. He has to go ahead and remove it. He can't have any type of mum. So he wants to remove the wart. And so on Shabbos, right? So Shabbos. So what does he do? So his friend takes it off with his teeth, right? His friend bites it off him, right? So we see over here, B'shinav in the klilo, chavera in ihulo. So this is referring to, in other words, with his teeth, right? And not your hand, which is a normal way. So that's a shinui. And also your friend and not you. So we see that as much as you can make a shinui, you make a shinui. So too in the case, right? Obviously they didn't ask them to remove the wart from the animal with his teeth, but, right? We see over there, you remove it with your hand, which is a shinui. And so we see Rabbi Eliezer holds that you remove it as you do a shinui as much as possible. So the Gemara asks, so whose opinion is this? If you say that this brisa over here, right, that a kohen, right, who has a wart, right, so he goes ahead and is basically his friend should remove it with his teeth. So if you say the Rabbanan who hold machshir mitzvah are eina doiches Shabbos, so kevan dami Rabbanan bi'alma mishum Shabbos, right? So since they always say that if you bite something off with your teeth, So hacha malihu mali chaveru. Understand? So according to the Rabbanan, who say the rices are not, but if you can do a shino, it's only a shvus. What does it make a difference? Him or his friend, right? So elalav, rather than must be Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar be'alma chayiv chatas. It says normally that a person is chayiv chatas for removing with one's teeth. Over here, even though we say machshir mitzvah is doiches Shabbos, so even though it's derisive to go ahead and bite it off, nevertheless, we say so we see that Rabbi Eliezer holds that even though that it is doiches Shabbos, but since it's doiches Shabbos and you could do it with a shinui, it's better to do it with a shinui. So therefore, right? In other words, the shinui doesn't necessarily make it from a deraisa to Rabbanan, right? What it does is it really was mutter. But as much as you can go ahead and do it in a different way, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and do it, right? So it's two completely different things, right? Sometimes you do it with a shinui to change it from a deraisa to a derabanan. But over here, Rabbi Eliezer has a svara that even though it would be mutter to do a deraisa, right? As much as you can go ahead and change it from the normal course of action, you go ahead and change it. And the other says no, maybe it's the rabbanan. Really, it's the Rabbanan. And now the reason why you have to do it with the Shinu is to change it from a deraisa to a Derabanan. The also love Krisa Kanami. You're right. If it was over there somewhere, right, on his body where you can reach, it's fine. You're right. You can go ahead and remove it. However, Hachmaskinan can go and Shasalo Nishicha Begabo Etzel Yada, right? Over here, we're talking about how do you remove his teeth. Let's say it was on his elbow, right? Or on his back, right? He wouldn't be able to reach it. So therefore, it's somebody else. And therefore, that's the way to do the Shinu. So Gemara says, Rabbanan. But if it's the Rabbanan, so Nishklin Nidem right? Why don't you go ahead and move with your hands, right? Why using your teeth, right? Only Bekli is a deraisa to move a wart, but not with your hand. So moving, like, it's not that with the hand is deraisa and with your teeth is derabanan, right? Rather, it means that it's right. Both of them are derabanan. So why are you changing it? Why are you doing with your teeth as opposed to your hand? Rabbanan Nishklin Nidem. So the Tivsha, the Rabbi Elazar, right? And also maybe we see from here, it's like Rabbi Elazar, Dama Rabbi Elazar, Machlekes Biyad, Aval Bekli, Divrei Kol Chai. And also maybe you can learn from here that really there's Machlekes Biyad, right? Whether or not Aval Bekli, everyone agrees that's one will be chayiv to remove it. So he says, I lutamech, Rabbi Elazar, Nami Lishkol Nebiyad. But according to you, right, that if this is Rabbi Elazar, why does he also take a biyad, right? Why do you have to go back? So So how could you go ahead? How could you go ahead and say that Rabbi Eliezer would say biyad? Say Marta bishloima Rabbi Eliezer haina degazer yad al tibikli. That's the reason why they said go ahead and move your hand because you might because kli. In other words, that's the reason. He says that you can't go ahead and do biyad because you might use a kli. So therefore, do it with your teeth. Eliyamarta Rabbanani, but if you say it's the opinion of the Rabbanan, so Nishkle Nili Biyad Vasulamidi, right? Just say take it off by your hand. Right? Talk about your hand is only a Rabbanan, and therefore it should be fine, right? So therefore it must be Rabbi Eliezer and not the Rabbanan, and therefore that's the difference between the two Mishnayos. Is Rabbi Eliezer will say that according to Rava, right? This is Rava's pshat. Right, that was it 2 months? Yeah, so he says, there's Rabbi Eliezer who says, Machshir Mitzvah Dois Shabbos, that's the source of our Mishnah. Therefore, he says that that's the reason why in our Mishnah, you can go ahead and remove the abelus with your hand and not the Rabbanan. And the reason is because really it is, it's Rabbi Eliezer who holds as Machshir Mitzvah is Dois Shabbos, and we just want to use a shinui to use your hand and not a kli. All right, we'll stop here at the Mishnah. We'll continue from here. The Mishnah starts a new sugya on Sunday, and then that will be Mitzvah Shem. We will finish Erevin on Sunday. Everyone have a wonderful Shabbos. And